Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Mike, it's really incredible what you can accomplish with rental properties, but I feel like sometimes it doesn't seem real until you actually meet someone that's really doing this. What do you think?
I think you're spot on there, Dan. My experience, and one of the reasons why I got into this business, was because my real estate broker at the time was cash flowing $100,000 per month. And when I saw those numbers, I was intrigued. And I said, if he can do that, I can do that. That got me on the right track to understand that my goals were attainable.
Seeing what was possible with rental property set Mike off on a journey where he started taking baby steps towards building his rental portfolio. Today, he's got more than enough rental income to cover all of his expenses. And on the podcast today, we're going to walk step by step how he did it, what he bought, and every step he took to get to where he is today. My guest on the show wants to be anonymous, so we're just going to call him Mike. But we'll take a quick break. We'll thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Mike. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property. And when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
Mike, let's start off talking about where you are today, and then we'll kind of take a step back and figure out how you got there. So tell us about your portfolio right now.
Sure. So we have about 155 units that we own and manage. We are grossing about 1.25 per year, which comes out to about $105,000 per month.
Wow, $105,000 a month. And then after you pay your mortgages and repairs and whatever else comes up, how much do you profit every month?
We cash flow about $35,000 per month.
Incredible. Well, let's take a step back now and figure out how you did this, because those are some really incredible numbers. So what got you first interested in buying rentals?
Yeah, so I started my real estate investing career back in 2003. It was a studio apartment, and it was about $140,000. And it was not a great looking apartment at the time, but I saw some vision there, and I saw that I can make this thing a lot nicer. And I did just that. And 3 years later, I turned around and sold that apartment for $280,000. So I was able to double my money in 3 years.
And that wasn't a rental. That was just a house you were living in.
That was a house I was living in, a studio apartment I was living in. And I decided to take that profit and buy 2 more apartments.
Okay. So was your thinking, okay, well, if I just made this incredible amount of money on one property, if I have 2, well, maybe now I can make even more.
Now I'll make even more money. But at that time, I needed a place to live as well. So I decided to put half of that money down into a place where I can live. And the other portion of that money, I bought another rental.
Okay.
Well, I bought my first rental, essentially.
You know, and I think what's also really cool about that is that because you lived in that first property, those gains were tax-free. So that's $140,000 tax-free, which is huge.
That was incredible.
Yeah.
At that time, I was working full-time for a company, and I made more in that sale than I did for the past 3 or 4 years that I was working.
I love it. All right. So now a lot of new landlords are nervous that they're going to get someone in the property and the tenant's not going to pay. Did you have any concerns like that?
I did exactly have those concerns. I was really nervous that I was going to place a tenant and they weren't going to pay rent. So what I did is I asked her to have her company direct deposit her paycheck to my bank account, which would make me feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, so you don't have to worry about that rent collection at all. And then how did it work out otherwise? Was she a good tenant?
She was fantastic. She lived there for about 5 or 6 years. It was always in the bank. The money was always in the bank. I didn't have to worry about anything. And if there was a problem, she would tell me about it.
Now, getting to your first rental is a huge step, but getting to your second rental can be harder sometimes. How did you do it? How did you get to property number 2?
Yeah. So when I realized that I was paying a mortgage on my home I was living in and I wasn't collecting any rent on it, I knew that wasn't the best approach. So I sold that apartment and I waited on the sidelines for the perfect place to purchase. And that was a 3-family building in a appreciating market. And I did some renovations in that apartment, lived in the first 2 floors and rented out the top 2 floors. So I was essentially living there for free.
Wow. Okay. So now the property you sold, I guess the place you were living in, did you make any money selling that property?
At that time, I was so caught up with the concept of paying a mortgage, and I didn't want to do that out of my W-2 paycheck. So I decided to take a little bit of a hit on that property, and I sold it for a small loss, maybe about a $15,000 loss. And I said to myself, you know what? It's better to take a loss here and then a big gain down the road if I can find that next perfect property.
Yeah. All right. So you moved in. So you were house hacking for your next property. So you're house hacking. You're renting out the other 2 units. How did that go? Like, was the rehab a lot of work, and how did it work out with your tenants?
Yeah, so that building that we purchased, my wife and we purchased a 3-family. The first 2 floors needed complete gut renovation. And we put a lot of money into that. We probably put about $250,000 into that renovation. The building itself, when we purchased it, was about $1,050,000. Okay. Pretty expensive building, but with the rent coming in from the top 2 floors, that equaled about $3,000. So that really helped out with the mortgage at that time.
It's interesting that your strategy there, because I think a lot of people listening to this podcast right now would probably say that's not a good deal because it doesn't meet the 1% rule. Your rents aren't high enough. But with you living in an expensive area like that, you're probably not going to get incredible numbers.
Initially, it didn't cover everything. I probably had to put maybe $900 out of pocket per month. Okay. But that was still a huge amount of savings that I was getting from my residence upstairs.
Right. And it's cheaper than you were paying probably at the house that you sold.
Yeah, that mortgage was all in with condo fees and HOAs. That came to probably about $3,000 per month. Okay. So I saved about $2,100 just by buying this other property.
Now, with saving that money, were you putting that towards continuing to grow your portfolio?
At that time, I was just using that money to pay down the renovation cost that we spent.
Okay. All right. So then how long did you, I know you ended up selling that 3-unit eventually. How long did you own it for?
So that property we purchased in 2011 and we sold that in 2016. So 5 years later.
And in that 5 years, did you buy anything else? Did you buy any other rentals?
We did. So during that time frame, we bought one portfolio of properties in a more of a cash flowing area, not as much as an appreciating area. My goal at that time was to really go full force into real estate, and I needed to find a way to offset some of my W-2 income. And I went in to purchase 13 units at that time, which amounted to 3 separate houses.
Okay. So, and this was in an area that was probably wasn't going to appreciate as much, but it was giving you cash flow.
It was giving me great cash flow.
Okay. Awesome.
I think I paid $600,000 for these 13 units. And at that time it was giving me back about $11,000 per month.
Wow. Okay.
In gross income.
Yeah. All right. Now, when you sold that 3-unit that you were house hacking, how much did you make on that sale?
So in 2016, when I sold that 3-unit building, we sold it for $2.1 million.
Wow.
So we made a little bit over $1 million.
$1 million in 5 years. I mean, that is mind-boggling that you can do that. And I think that's the trade-off, that you're giving up the cash flow for potential appreciation, and you hit a home run. I mean, that was incredible. So that's life-changing money to have $1 million. So now what do you do? Like, do you take that money and pay the taxes on it? Or did you 1031 and buy something else and defer the taxes on it?
Yeah, we hit a grand slam with that one, Dan. Yeah. We realized that the portfolio that we purchased right before we sold that building was doing great, and we wanted more of that. We wanted more cash flow. Yeah. So we didn't want to pay the taxes on that property we made $1 million on. Right. So we 1031 that, and we returned that 1031 exchange into purchasing the remainder of our 150 units.
Wow. So that is just like, it's hard to even comprehend this, what you're saying. So you sold that 3-unit building, and that bought you what, like 120 units?
135 units.
135 units. So tell me about that. So tell me about the 135 units.
Yeah. So what we did is we found different investors looking to sell their investments, essentially their portfolios. So we did a lot of research on the sidelines before we were able to sell the building, because we needed to be within a certain time frame to make that 1031 happen. You have 145 days to identify a property and then close on that property. So we found three different portfolios. One was a student housing portfolio, which we absolutely love that market. It's really a great market to be in, because the parents essentially are guaranteeing their children are going to need a place to live and will pay that rent. So that makes up about 64 of our bedrooms, 64 of our tenants or residents.
Okay.
The other portfolio we purchased was 15 houses in a cash flowing area, and that amounts to about 30 units, and that brings in about $35,000 per month alone.
Now, and go ahead.
And then we purchased a couple offshoot single family homes, and then multifamily homes, along with a mobile home park, which we also like that market really well, because those mobile home parks cash flow unbelievable.
And this is not the properties you bought. It's not in the area that you live.
No, they're about 2.5 hours from where we live, and we visit the properties once, maybe twice a month.
Now, did it feel risky at all to be like, so you had incredible success investing in an area that you knew very well, where you were living, and now you're investing 2.5 hours away. Did it take a long time to learn the market and to figure out where to invest?
Yeah, that was a long process. Before we pulled the trigger on purchasing anything, we did a lot of investigation. I did a lot of driving up to these areas. I drove around during the day, drove around at night, spoke to local police officers, hardware stores. I just wanted to make sure where I was investing was the right place for me. And even still that I did that, COVID brought on huge amounts of things that I was never able to prepare for. So you can do all the research in the world and feel really confident in your decision, and then something can really set you back.
Yeah. So what happened during COVID?
Well, there was an eviction moratorium in place, and when that happened, we were not able to collect rent or evict any of our residents.
That must have really been scary, that you've got these new properties that are supposed to be making you all this money, but now all of a sudden things are looking like they're heading for trouble. So that must have been incredibly difficult to make it through that period.
It was the most challenging part of this business that I've ever experienced. Although I will say that my student portfolio was doing phenomenal. There was no issues there at all. It was the offshoot markets where the cash flow was great. Those are the markets where they're a little bit sketchy. And being able to get through that during COVID really made me feel confident that if I can get through this, and I can get through anything that happens, anything that comes my way.
Yeah. I mean, we talk all the time on the podcast about diversification and how it's important to have different strategies and different things going on. And it seems like the diversification of having different types of properties, that's really what saved you.
It really is, Dan. I couldn't have been where I am without a guaranteed income coming in. I wasn't able to leave my W-2 job until earlier this year. But my intention originally was to leave 3 years ago, but COVID hit and kind of put a little bit of a delay on my exit.
So then walk me through how that works. So now you've seen, like, so now everything is stabilized, that you got through that difficult period. You see that every month it's pretty consistent that 35,000 is coming in. Like, did you just decide one day, okay, like, I feel comfortable, like I know I can support myself off the cash flow?
Pretty much, yeah. I waited 3 years to make sure that this was working the way I needed it to work. And first I had my wife go ahead and leave her corporate job, and we were still able to live the same lifestyle. And then once I was able to stabilize all these properties after COVID ended, and start to do more renovations and, place the right people into the properties, and know that there was a consistent flow of residents looking for properties that we were renting, it made me feel so confident. And, we look at numbers a lot using our accounting software. We use QuickBooks, and just seeing all this information at our fingertips, we're able to really make really educated decisions and realize that, hey, there's no reason why we can't put that W-2 job in the rearview mirror and just go full force with our real estate business.
And do you have a property manager?
We have a property manager for our student portfolio. And then we have contractors and handymen that work on site. And one guy lives on the property, and he gives us subsidized rent, and he's there 24/7. So we figured it out. It took us a while to find the right people. And for the first 2 or 3 years, we couldn't find the right people. We were always pulling in different people for different jobs and trying to really beg and for somebody to come and do the work. But once we found the right team, it is a world of a difference. I know that I have the people in place to fix my issues or fix the residents' issues at a moment's notice.
And the distance hasn't been a problem. Being 2.5 hours away, it doesn't sound like that's affected your management of the properties.
No, we use a property management software. So everything is done through portals. Everything is done through online software. So any issue comes up, we can dispatch that and allocate that out to the right person.
As far as, like, if somebody wants to replicate what you've done, I think you've got an interesting formula with investing first in an area that's going to appreciate, and then taking that money and buying in a more of a cash flow area. So if you were to go back and do it again, do you think investing in the appreciation area was really the key to make this work? Or if you had started in the cash flow area, do you think everything would have still worked out?
That's a great question, Dan. In my experience, in order to do what I did and replicate that and leave a corporate job, I think you need to have a big lump sum of money to really put into it full force. I'm sure you can do the appreciation thing like I did. I'm sorry, I'm going to repeat that. I'm sure you can do the cash flow thing. It may take you a longer period of time to really get to the point you need to be. But if you have a big lump sum of money up front to purchase a whole bunch of properties, I think that's the move.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting that lump sum. I mean, it's like that $1 million is just life-changing. I mean, it's so incredible what that has done for you, and the incredible return that you're getting every single month for the rest of your life off that one incredible investment.
Yeah, I couldn't say it any better, Dan. It's really life changing, and I'm so happy that I'm doing this now. And even though the challenges were in the past and we got through those, it's so worth it. It was worth being in those situations because now is when I can enjoy all of it. It's very smooth now. It's a smooth operation.
Let's talk about this for a second as we wrap things up, because I think it's easy to walk away from hearing this interview and say, oh, Mike got lucky. He bought a property that appreciated. But when you think about it, the property that he bought was no doubt in a growing area and was in the path of progress, and that property went up in value. But Mike also bought a property that was a fixer-upper. The property sounded like it was in pretty bad shape when he bought it. He put a lot of time and money into fixing it up. So the appreciation wasn't all market appreciation. It was the combination of market appreciation and then also forced appreciation. The other thing that I think is an interesting thing to think about is investing for cash flow is great. I mean, that's what I do exclusively. Every property that I buy cash flows. But I think it's also important to diversify your portfolio a little bit. And this is something I've actually been thinking about, is that it might be a good idea to buy properties that you're buying for appreciation. Of course, I mean, you want to make sure the rent's going to at least cover the expenses, but maybe just buy a property or two that are in a good area that are likely to appreciate over time. And maybe then you can do something like Mike did, where once those properties appreciate, now you've got a big sum of money that you can use to create more cash flowing assets. So I think there's a lot of ways you can do rentals, and I think that's what's great about this. But I think what Mike did is incredible. And if anyone wants to reach out to Mike, I've got his email address on the website. You can track it down at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 478. I'd like to thank Chaley Ridge for sponsoring today's episode. If you're looking to buy a rental property, whether you're just getting started or you want to add to your portfolio, reach out to Chaley. She's a nationwide lender. She has tons of different loan programs, and she can find something that'll work for you in your situation. If you want to find out more, you can track down Chaley at ridgelendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you hit the follow button, and you'll get notified every time a new episode comes out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.